Dobrodošli u Netokracija podcast. Ja sam Ivan Brezga-Brkan. Osnivač Netokracije, netko se bavi startupima već duže vrijeme. Danas ću razgovarati sa predstavnicima fonda Eleven Ventures o tome kako se vraćaju u regiju i vraćaju se investiranju i u hrvatske startupove, tako da ćemo pričati na engleskom jeziku. Žao mi je, ne znam bugarski, tko mi kriv, but yeah, we're switching to English. Hi guys and welcome to the Netokracija podcast. Hope you're doing good. Cool. Okay. So for those who have not met you before, it would be really great for you to introduce yourselves and give a little bit of background of what you've done in the startup ecosystem. And we can start with Vasil.
First, thanks for the invitation and for having us. A few words about myself. I'm better known as an entrepreneur than as a venture capitalist. Started a company called Telerik in 2002 with 3 other friends, grew it to 800 people, sold it to a US public company, stayed there for a few years, and then ultimately got back to my entrepreneurial roots, and they took me to becoming a partner at Eleven Ventures, which is an early stage fund based out of Bulgaria, investing in the region. And I more or less made my hobby my profession. I was a very prolific angel investor. And when the opportunity arose, I was fortunate enough to join Ivo and Daniel and rethink how Eleven should look like, what are the needs of the Balkan ecosystem in terms of early stage funding, and it has been a great ride so far. Really fortunate to be working with a lot of young, ambitious people who want to change the region, who want to change the world, and all of those expensive lessons that I accumulated as an entrepreneur, I can channel to them. So it's gratifying in many ways and a good extension to my entrepreneurial career.
So the PTSD from the entrepreneurial experience from the start has worn out, and now you can share the good tips from everything.
Only the good things. Everything else is bleak, and I've long forgotten all the painful moments.
Awesome. Ivalo, we've met you in the startup community. You haven't been to Croatian events in a long time. So for the younger viewers, the younger founders, could you introduce yourself? And what you do at Eleven?
Thank you, Ivan, as well for the invitation. I think we know each other for like 10 years or so. I mean,
we're old farts.
Back in 2012, 2013, when we started Eleven as an accelerator, we were a bit more going around the Western Balkans, including Croatia and the neighboring countries. And as you know, we started as an accelerator, but eventually we moved a bit to pre-seed and seed investment. At some point of time, we had a bit of a crisis right after we finished with the accelerator. That's when actually Vasco joined and replaced one of our other founders. And at that time, we raised our first entirely private fund. And that's when we tested the model of pre-seed and seed investments, which we like better than the accelerator model. And we are building upon that now. Before starting Eleven, I was actually involved with private equity and venture capital. So no entrepreneurial background for me, unfortunately. I'm trying to learn from Vasco and the other guys as we go along. And we'll be really, really happy to resume our nice trips around the Balkans with you and the rest of the guys.
Yeah, for all of those who want more details, just look under the tag 11 on Netokracija. There's a lot of articles about it and what the guys have done before. And we'll get to the fund and the private fund and everything else. I'll remind you of that. As well, I remind you to subscribe, of course, to the Netokracija podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, any podcast app that you might use. I'm not sure if is there a Bulgarian podcast app, a local one, anything, or does everyone just use Spotify?
There's plenty of very interesting podcasts in Bulgaria, such as the Superhuman, Radio Tochka Point 2, and many, many others. So we're fortunate to have quite a few people creating great content and capturing all the insights from the people in the new economy and sharing those with a broader audience, hopefully sparking their interest in venture capital, startups, building companies, and just good business practices altogether.
Awesome. I mean, it's great to hear that there are a lot of Bulgarian podcasts, and of course, for our audience, completely ignore those podcasts. Subscribe to Netokracia podcast. But
they're in Bulgarian.
Yeah, they're in Bulgarian.
Really, you gotta up the language skills.
I mean, yeah, you could learn Bulgarian, maybe. We never know. But let's get back to the Bulgarian startup ecosystem, and maybe what the Croatian ecosystem and the regional ecosystem can learn from you guys and your experience. And unfortunately, one thing that I've noticed in my more than a decade covering the region is that there is no pan-European startup community. I guess there's always a community of like those. I always remember like the events in Vienna or something. It's always the same people coming to these events and, oh, let's connect. Great. But like everyone else is just like building their companies and not connecting. So what happens is, for example, that Croatian founders don't know Serbian founders, don't know Slovenian founders, et cetera, and you would expect them to know each other. And that's why I'm guessing I'm probably one of the only people who knows at least a bit about the Bulgarian startup ecosystem. So let's do a little intro and maybe share some tips and so on. And let's start maybe with Telerik. Vasil, you mentioned the company that you founded, and for what's the thing that people need to understand about Telerik's involvement in the community? Because from my point of view, I see it like the InfoBip, what InfoBip now is to Croats, like the unicorn, the champion, they could do it, we can do it. That was Telerik's role, I'm guessing, in the Bulgarian ecosystem, but earlier?
Quite accurate. Only difference is that we didn't become a unicorn before our exit. And things happened much earlier than with InfoBip, but really the story and the major learnings are the same. We show that you can build a leading company from Bulgaria against all odds, without having domain experience, without having business experience, and still we managed to build a 700-800 person company, which was dominant in the developer tool space. Offices in 15 countries, amazing people across the board. And what's more rewarding is not so much the exit itself, but really what followed later on. One, all those people, they got to see how things get born, like a true product company, not services, but really how you do product at scale, how you incubate projects from 0 to millions in revenue. So the combination of this domain knowledge, the product knowledge, how you build a business, the social bonding, and the pretty wide equity coverage that we had really enabled the Telerik success to be replicated. So more than 40, 50 companies, I lost count, but about 50-ish companies up until now have been born from Telerik employees who are building very, very significant companies. And they are already past Telerik in terms of enterprise value. You see companies like GTM Hub, which is also founded by a fellow Croatian, Ivan Osmak, and a few other Bulgarian guys. Companies like Payhawk, Office R&D, raising mega rounds of 100 million plus, bringing a lot of top-tier investors. So really our success ignited some of those things. It played a key role in helping those companies come to life. But we're very fortunate for them to be extending quite a bit the model and showing that you can do even bigger things. So we are very lucky in the sense to have partnered with those companies and to be part of their journey, and Bulgaria will soon have its first unicorns. And what's even more exciting is that they are replicating this model in turn, like broad equity coverage, involvement in the community, not just basking in the sun and enjoying their success, but really contributing to the success of the overall ecosystem. And that's something that we at Telerik try to do early on. Basically support any entrepreneurial initiative you can think of, support educational initiatives, bring in knowledge from abroad to Bulgaria, and basically help the community grow, connect, because no company and no venture capital firm is bigger than its ecosystem. And what we try to do is to, as we joke, to institutionalize our success, so that it's a foundation for others to get even further.
I'm interested in what you said about like no company is bigger than the ecosystem. Looking at what's happening in the Croatian ecosystem now, it's like there's a lot of successful companies and they are contributing back, but I'm not sure it's still at the scale that, at least I was told, that Telerik gave back to the community when you were there and the company was still independent, you were having taxes and so on. What would you say to founders who have now found their success either through exits or venture funding and so on? Why contribute back? Because a lot of the things I hear is, we'd like to do it, but we're busy building our company. I'm not sure if they see the value, honestly, yet.
Well, there's like no immediate value to you, but the value is that later on, your children and the children of your fellow colleagues and whatnot will live in a better country. And for that, if you delay, it's one more day, 2 more days, 3 more days. So I hear this excuse quite often. Well, I'm busy building a company. Sure. Build a company, be successful. Don't like devote all of your efforts to community, because, first and foremost, it's like in the airplane. You put the oxygen mask on yourself and then you help others. But, it's a muscle that has to be trained. And even if you cannot devote a lot of time, a lot of money today, just because you don't have it and you're accumulating wealth and success and whatnot, still, you have to start small. And over time, change the balance so that you're more and more. The more successful you are and the less hands-on you are in building a company, the more you are involved in the community. And once you have a critical mass of people doing that, suddenly very big things start happening really fast. And I encourage everyone who's building a company, who's seeing success, to really focus on that, because it's very essential to what will happen in the years to come, and they should not abdicate. The more successful you are, the more responsibility you have as an entrepreneur, as a venture capitalist, as whatever thing of value that you hold. The other way to influence positively, even when you're building a company, is to have the proper cap table. At Telerik, over 350 people held stock out of the whole company. So all of that capital gives people life-changing experiences. It gives them the opportunity to start companies, to do something meaningful, to be more liberated in a way in their decisions. And if you want to change the world, start with your cap table. That's something that's entirely in your control and which has a very big impact on your company, on the culture, and later on in the ecosystem.
Which makes sense. And that's one thing that I'm happy to see, again, happening locally, is that there are more ESOPs, people getting equity. I think there have been instances of exits happening where it's obvious that none of the early employees or people who contributed have seen real benefit from the success of these deals, which has soured some relationships, I'm guessing. And then, I mean, even in the US, we see instances like MailChimp and their exit, where it was a whole hodgepodge where, yeah, we're bootstrapped, profitable, and proud, but yeah, we've each founder gets $6 billion or something, and that wasn't as fun as. But what you said really, I think, hopefully it resonates with local founders. One thing that I would like to ask Ivailo on the community part is one thing that I've heard from, and I've asked the startups that you invested in before, because I want to know, like, we haven't heard from 11 in like, I think it was like 6 years, because the last article on Netocracia before this one about you guys raising the new fund was from 2016. Okay, so, and I mean, I judge time in terms of Netocracia articles, but the feedback that I've gotten was really good, and I'd like to read, or at least not read, but share the insights of one founder, Ivan Ivankovic, who is now the CEO of Fonoa, who raised a big round earlier. So he's ex-Uber, and more importantly, he's ex-Qui, a company that 11 invested in early on.
I still have a T-shirt of Qui.
There you go. So Ivan unfortunately couldn't send a recording or anything, but what he shared with me is that he's really happy with his time at 11. It really helped to, and I would like to quote this, kickstart his startup career, his whole startup career. And what he really liked was going to Bulgaria, being part of the community, being supported. Like, he really cherishes that experience. And his own view, when I asked him about, okay, so you experienced the early 11, now they're coming back, they helped you, what would you advise to them? And his thoughts were, well, the thing that 11 did well was you were always part of the community. You were at events, you were at pitches. I mean, we went everywhere from Belgrade to Zagreb. I remember those times. So Ivailo, from that point of view, what I would like to ask is, how do you plan to be that part of the community again? Because on one hand, in the article where you discussed with my colleague about 11 Ventures and everything, you did say you would like to be a part of. What does that mean? Especially in terms of now, I mean, there are less events, more remote work, stuff like that. Is 11 going to be a part of the Croatian startup ecosystem? And if so, how?
Okay, so maybe I should go back in the early days. I believe this was probably the biggest thing that we achieved, is actually the sheer amount of startups that we invested in. It was like more than 100 startups. So it was natural for us to build a very large and dynamic community. And it was, as you mentioned, a lot of events, pitches, traveling around, but it was indeed a very good sense of community. And I think that this is what helped a lot of those entrepreneurs, maybe not in their first attempt, but in their subsequent endeavors, to be more successful and to have friends throughout the region. And I think that we still have those friends in Croatia, in Serbia, across the region. But for a few years, we were just very busy with the local ecosystem and what we had as opportunities here. And only now we are again ready to explore the broader region, and we have started doing it. We already have a few investments in both Romania and Greece, and hopefully soon in Croatia as well. And for sure, we would love to come again to your lovely country and reconnect with our old friends, make new ones. I think that we are doing it slightly different this time around. We are trying to be more personal and get involved more deeply with each founder, with each startup. So, I mean, it's a natural evolution, and I think that that's what actually startups need, founders need. But it doesn't mean that we will abandon the broader community and will not help it. If I can make a small comparison between what I see in Bulgaria and what I've seen a long time ago, as you mentioned, in Croatia, is that it seemed that because of the early work of 11 and Launchhub mm, here, and maybe because we had these two accelerators, not early stage funds with a lot of investment, so there was actually money for early stage startups. Somehow the local ecosystem, the Bulgarian one, was a bit more united and a bit more open, not trying to get into clusters or not trying to separate one from the other. While I think that it's not so often that you see this in some of, like in Romania or Greece or even Croatia, where you have separate clusters. And it's always better if you try to do something together rather than if you try to separate things. At least that's my. So we'll try to be such a uniting force together with the other funds that now have cross-border ambitions, because this also helps. If you have a bunch of funds that invest not only in their local country but across, this would also help.
Just to add to what Ivo said, Ivan, it's very essential because you mentioned about community, people not knowing each other. This applies even to the local market, people not knowing each other. So before they get to know everybody in the world, it's worth like knowing people around you. It's worth learning how to do much more together, whether you are competing VC funds but driving the agenda of the VC industry of the country, or companies fighting for talent but going together to solve the big issues around talent, education, etc. So the natural evolution, and I think it's happening, is people understanding that they need to row in the same direction together in the local communities, Bulgarian, Croatian, Romanian, and slowly building on top of that and building the linkage with neighboring countries, and really understanding that really our big chance is to play it as a region. The more unicorns we have, the more integration we have, the more quality investors and buyers see from our part of the world, the more we are relevant, and it plays off well for everyone.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and it's something that, again, I've been kind of disappointed hasn't happened. And interestingly enough, what Ivalo said about like you focused on local because it made more sense, especially for the accelerator, as you shared in the article as well. It's something I think that it resonates with Netokracija, because like 10 years ago, and Ivalo probably knows this story, like at one point we announced that we would launch Netokracija in Slovenia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Macedonia. I think we launched 7 countries because we were young and naive, and then when reality hit and we had to actually build a business model, it was like, oh, okay, we can support like 2 or 3 markets, it's fine, let's get back. And then we started focusing less on what's happening in the region and focusing locally. One thing I would like to ask is, Ivalo, you said like in Bulgaria you managed to have a more cohesive community that collaborates and so on. Can you give a few examples that you've seen locally and you haven't seen in Romania or Greece and Croatia, some examples maybe that we can be inspired by? Because I would completely agree with you. I would actually go one step further and not say that people here are just like in clusters, but actually more of a Balkan term, unfortunately, that in some cases they are more divided into clans of a sort, which is something I don't like. And it's something that, again, I'm disappointed, because in the end, if you want yourself to be successful, you want the community to be successful for it. But anyways, going off track a bit, could you maybe share a few specific examples of what was going on or what's going on in Bulgaria that we could be inspired by?
Yeah, I will try to answer it. It's not that simple. It's I think that for sure Telerik and what Telerik did helped a lot in this direction, because actually, among other things, Vasco and Zarko, two of the founders of Telerik, also among the most active angel investors. So they've invested across the board in our portfolio companies, in Longstaff's portfolio companies, in other startups, and this cross-semination, I would call it, helps so that we are not competitors or enemies. We are more in a collaborative mode most of the time. Occasionally we might compete, occasionally we might step on each other's toes, but all in all, we are trying to move the whole ecosystem forward and having these interlinks. I mean, for example, LaunchClub, some of the founders of LaunchClub have been investors in our funds, and there have been a lot of cross investments among all the VC funds of the local community. So this helps. I mean, if you have money flowing around, it definitely inspires confidence, and you cannot. I mean, if you trust these people to work with them and it definitely helps. For sure, another thing that helped, but you also have this in Croatia. So I'm not sure if it's. I mean, it's the co-working spaces. So initially there was only one. Now there are more than, and Campus X actually where I am now, and where we are now has probably become the unicorn factory. But apart from that, these startup hubs have also contributed a lot, and they were not trying to. I mean, they created, each of them created kind of their own community, but there was again they were not competing directly. I don't know how this happened, but they each carved out their own niche, and they somehow managed to coexist peacefully and to actually become part of the whole Sofia community. I would not even call it the Bulgarian community. It's kind of more or less a Sofia thing.
Yeah, just to add to what Ivo said, many of the initial funders of companies, of support organizations, etc., were the same, and we kind of early on understood that if we break it up and compartmentalize it in clans, like you said, it limits the opportunity for everyone. So rather than pick one fund to invest, one co-working space, one support one NGO that does this and that, we had like long tail approach, and all of us supported everything we could. And because we were like so across the board, we had the communication channels, we had the economically intertwined interests, etc. So we had incentive and tools to balance everything off and more or less establish the right way of conflict resolution, setting more or less the right ideals, so that as many of those companies and organizations would take a look at the big goal in front of the community more so than just the immediate selfish interest that all of us have representing the organizations that we primarily serve. And this evolved more or less into a community-wide understanding about what are the principles to grow in a win-win situation, so that it's not all zero-sum and you steal talent, you steal tenants from a community, but rather what are the tools to really grow the ecosystem altogether. And it all starts with people and their choices. So it's all about those clans understanding that together they can do a lot more, and just finding the right incentives to do so that you connect their economic interests, and then they quickly find the solutions to the small conflicts that emerge.
Oh, I do hope we get inspired by some of the things you said. One of the things I would like to get back to also, you said with Telerik, at least like 40 or 50 companies were born from ex-employees, thanks to both their experience, the benefits financial that they got from the exit of Telerik and so on. I'm interested just to dive in a bit more. So about a year or two ago, I wrote an article about how when Infobip, which at the time I think got its initial investment, its first investment after 14 years of bootstrapping, I wrote that, I mean, if they IPO or if they exit, they're employees later on, because of their ESOP, would start their own companies. And I got a lot of, not flack from the community, but a lot of feedback that was like, I don't know, are you sure if they're entrepreneurs? They might just like want to buy a house on the Adriatic coast, like chill and like, that's it. And I always get like this feedback from a big part of the community, like, yeah, we might get a few companies. And I mean, realistically now, Infobip has, I think, 2,000 employees just in Croatia, or at least 1,000, I'm sure. Why do people start companies after they leave a company like Telerik? Or who starts them? Is it the engineers? Is it all across? Is it the managers? Is there anything that you do have insights in terms of, okay, who started those companies that came out of after Telerik, that were born?
It's all across the board. You see business people, you see people from engineering. Largely, it's ex-engineers, just because we were a developer tools company, and out of this 700-800 people, probably 500 plus were in engineering roles, dev, support, QA, etc. So it's only natural for tech people to start those companies. But there's a lot of variability. What really matters is that we had a very strong entrepreneurial culture inside. So people were given freedom; they could innovate. It was not we want to believe it was a meritocratic culture with all the mistakes that we've made, but it wasn't like just a top-down decision. Everybody's voice was heard, and this more or less also was responsible for the type of people we were looking for. So we were looking for driven people, for people who were curious, for people who wanted to create. And essentially, that's why I guess they're more entrepreneurial than in other companies, because it's a self-selection bias. We were just fortunate enough to have selected many people who had this in them. And I believe that fast-growing companies with the right culture, like Infobip and others, they select the right people. So company culture plays a really big role in terms of what you see. And that's why you see some companies which are very successful, like top-down, few people make all the decisions, equity is totally concentrated, just a handful of people, and you don't have the equity distribution, you don't have the culture. And that's why companies are not born. So I see it as a combination, as I said earlier, of the right people with, the entrepreneurial mindset, with the curiosity, with the ambition to create, whether it's code or companies, but just the willingness to create and not stand still. The understanding that, life's to do something, not just sit down on the beach. Many people who had the chance decided not to do so because it's a waste of talent. But this is a thing of beliefs. Again, it goes down to the selection. The other thing is wide equity distribution, so that if there's a big outcome, it affects people positively and gives them a head start. Then it's the social bonding, because if people form, clusters within the company, then they use those clusters to move elsewhere, to start a company, to move to a new company, because they're not single electrons. And this combined with better and better ecosystem really helps spawn more and more companies. But it really starts with the leaders of the most successful companies in terms of what trajectory they will choose, in terms of how they will reward and incentivize employees and the type of culture they will set. And if they look at them as like stewards and look at them as good teachers to those people, and put it as a central belief and desire for them to help those people advance, they will surpass the successes, the current successes that we all admire. And it's just going to go bigger and bigger.
I think based on that, and that would be interesting to see, I think we might be able to see what the leadership of some of these successful companies was actually based on, if their ex-employees do start new companies, et cetera, as maybe one of the potential results.
This is a very important thing, and I believe it should be one of the key KPIs we look at as ecosystems and as success, because we tend to look at success just by the numerical stuff, like how many zeros it has, but really we should try to weave in the impact that some effort has. And this is like, for me, a very big determinant. And I was joking yesterday with a friend. He was asking me, so what's your like measurement for success in life? And I said, well, I have many, but on the business side, one thing that like I have as a measurement and a driver is how many millionaires I have helped create, who have created millionaires in turn. Because it comes to show two things. One, how successful you are at doing the first level thing, and then really setting the right values so they are sensitive about passing this forward generation after generation. And if it works well with two hops, I'm an optimist that it will just continue replicating down the road.
Keep on going and creating a growth culture. That's very, very, very true. And that's one thing we do have seen in the community. A lot of founders coming out of not even successful companies, but like good companies and starting their own companies, where you see that the culture, even if the company was smaller, was set right, and they were inspired to, okay, let's do something of our own. And I mean, again, if we go back to Ivan Ivankovic in Fonoa, I think that's a good. I don't think he might have started Fonoa if he hadn't had his 11 experience. And again, as you said, alumni, Fonoa, for those of you who haven't read Netokrati's article in detail, a lot of their investors are actually ex-Uber employees. They're alumni. They just like told their Uber alumni network, and they invested as angels as well. That's really good. I think there's a lot of stuff here that we could learn as a community. I hope a lot of founders take all of these to heart.
And the other thing, Ivan, which is very essential, is once people see success, how are they going to use their money? Are they going to put it, as you said, buy a house in the Bahamas and...
it doesn't have to be Bahamas. It can be Istria.
Yeah, okay, Istria. Or buy, ETFs and something else where just money sits and creates value for another economy. Or they're going to put it to good use. Invest in startups, invest in funds, invest in the supporting infrastructure, all those non-profits, all those initiatives that really drive the community. And the big battle is really on opening the eyes of people that they have to vote right with the wallet. That, we can talk about values and whatnot, but ultimately it's what you make with your own money. And if you decide not to start companies, not to support the local funds, not to invest in the infrastructure that breeds this new economy and success, you have no one else to blame. You voted with your wallet in the wrong way. You put it in passive stuff. So if you want to change something, put more of that money and your assets, because assets are not just money. It's time, network, knowledge. Put as much as you can, recycle it in the local economy, in the regional economy. The more you do that, the faster the flywheel of the ecosystem spins. The more you let it sit idle or let it slip in other economies, the slower things grow. So just I appeal to the audience, everybody who's listening, be active with your time, money, with everything you have, because every single dollar, every single minute, every knowledge matters. Recycle it in the economy and take great care in the success of others, because ultimately that's the most selfish thing you can do. It all comes back to you in just a bigger way, just not immediate, but it does come back, and it comes in the right way.
I do hope that I get some feedback from founders on this. I know that one guy who's a very successful founder who told me on one episode of this podcast, actually, that he's just a bad investor. He's not going to angel invest because he tried it. He's bad at it. A couple of months past, he invested in 2 startups because he wants to support them. So yeah, I think in time, founders do get that role, and hopefully they do. And one thing I would like to add is, with Launch Hub and 11, for example, even the early days, I was always fascinated by, you have 2 rival funds, but they're always at the same events. They're always like basically working together. It's always I mean, yeah, that's how you do it. Well, here, even now with the VCs and everyone else, it's again a bit of a dogfight. So hopefully we see a bit of cooperation on that front as well. So let's move on to the actual fund. For those who have listened, who have said, okay, these guys are cool. They want to invest in the community. They have experience and so on. What do you plan to offer founders from Croatia? And why should they take your money and knowledge and so on, and not from the US or some other fund? Because some of the feedback from the community a lot of times has been that local investors are bad, right? Just like before, right? Local investors are bad. Like the local VC funds don't have the network for follow-up rounds. They can't really support us in our business. What's the point? Let's bootstrap. That's why a lot of and actually most of the success stories that we're talking about from Infobip, Nanobit, 5, Infinome, and so on are bootstrapped, right? Like 90% of them are bootstrapped. They haven't taken or gotten investments from any of the local funds. What would you say to founders who are thinking, okay, I want to raise a round for my early stage startup. I'm from Croatia. They're from Bulgaria. Why should they choose you guys?
You want to take a stab, Ivo?
You can both.
Vasco is the better one at this, but
I'm the sales guy.
You're the sales guy. Yeah, you are.
Now, why should they take our money? So that's one of the major things we understood, and that's why we took a Bulgaria-centric approach when we started the second fund, because we said we're not gonna move on autopilot and just continue being an accelerator. Where's the market? What do founders need? Where do things break? And that's where we saw the most critical part is not really getting started. It's between getting started and getting product market fit. And we said, okay, can we help them? And the answer was yes. Most of us have entrepreneurial experience. We've built many companies. We've helped many companies as investors. Aside from Ivo, all of the other partners have plenty of entrepreneurial experience, have held C-level roles, have turned around companies. So really the operational angle and help that you can bring in terms of building a company and then helping it scale and become a legit business is what we could bring to the table. And we said, okay, but how can you do that effectively if you're all over the place? Which led us to another critical decision to be a vertically focused fund, meaning that we don't invest all over the place. We invest in just 5 key verticals or teams: fintech, health tech, future of food, future of work, and e-commerce and enabling technology. Why? Because we have a critical mass of companies where each of them can cross-pollinate the knowledge, where they understand how to be helpful, where their networks come into play, where we know the people, the players. So really, it's like a mini ecosystem, mini cluster. And if you don't have a mini cluster of knowledge, of connectivity, and you don't have deep knowledge in the value chain, you can't really be helpful. How can you help a company get to product market fit if you don't understand the landscape, if you don't understand how money flows, what are the problems, what are the players, where can you build a competitive advantage, etc. So that's more or less what sits at the center of our strategy, that we are an extension to the team. We don't just provide you money. You take our expensive money so that we have an incentive to work with you to build a company, but we are an extension to your team. Us as partners, the 11 team, and the whole infrastructure around us in terms of community, mentors, entrepreneurs in residence. We basically help you fill in all the blanks so that you can go through the hurdles and in a shorter time frame get to product market fit, set the right foundations for the company, prepare you to fundraise, and then know that you are in good shape across the board. And that's what we bring. We bring a lot of domain knowledge, a lot of network, a lot of companies that are already in that space where your company is, and where you can learn from others, not just us.
So what would you say are the biggest successes maybe that you would highlight from 11 in those domains?
Well, we are very, very fortunate to have amazing companies in our portfolio. Perhaps the one that comes to mind is Payhawk. Payhawk is a company that was started just a few years ago, and it's on track to be a unicorn very, very soon. Founded by former Telerik colleagues. We were the first institutional investor. We've seen the company pivot from one idea to another, doing adjustments to the business model. And you see how this, team of two very ambitious people has grown into 80 people, looking to grow to 300 people and grow 9x in revenue this year with some of the best funds in the world. And it comes to show that local investors are not that incompetent. Or maybe we just got lucky. Who knows? Time will tell. If we manage to show enough Payhawks emerge where we are the institutional investor and they succeed, maybe it wouldn't be just luck. But let's say, we got lucky with this one. Nonetheless, you see local company tackling a big problem, but it gets world-class investors like Curly Birds, like QED, Green Oaks, Sprints Capital. Amazing. So it comes to show that it can be done. It comes to show that you start with one idea, but you inevitably, as you try to fill the market, you end up elsewhere. And it comes to show how much, how important the local ecosystem is. Because with Payhawk, not just us, but like the local community, everybody chipped in with investments in the rounds we did where they co-invested with us, with lending a hand in terms of knowledge and network to remove roadblocks. Here's our general counsel to help you with that. Here's this person to help you with other regulation. Here's this person to help with fintech. So once you get to this level of maturity, companies can make very quick progress.
So it takes a village to build a startup, it seems, in the Balkans, which is good. And I would like to leave it at that.
Yeah, actually, if I can just add one more comment, is that VC and seed investments is actually a local business. I mean, it's original at best. The big guys will come at the Series A and beyond, and they will come very aggressively if they like what they see. But before you reach the stage where you are attractive for the US and the UK investors, you need some lending help from the local community, from the local funds. And it's actually our sweet spot. And I think that it's the sweet spot of many of the funds in the region.
Very true. I would agree with that, especially because now, unlike 10 years ago when everything started, now we have investors that have experience like you guys, and we have local angels. Just last week, we saw Infinum invest in Rentlio. We'll see a couple of other investments as an exclusive in Entocratia very soon. So it's going to be a very interesting 10 years. Oh God, if I'm going to be covering this in 10 years, I'm going to fucking kill myself. Anyways, I'd like to leave it at that. Thank you guys very much for talking both about the Bulgarian startup ecosystem, about your experience, and about 11. I hope the founders that are interested contact you directly. If you have any questions that you want to ask me, samo mi pošaljite email, nije uopće bed. But thank you guys. Hvala vam što ste slušali, podsjetit ću vas da se subscribe-te ako niste. Ovo je bio Netokracija podcast i nadam se da ćemo još vidjeti 11. Čujemo sljedeći put. Ćao.